Want to know how to make your Sims 4 terrain look less like a base game build and more like something that can win garden awards? Today you're going to learn exactly how to use these tools to create stunning landscapes and finally feel confident with your builds. By the end, you're going to know the secrets to making your lots feel alive and realistic. So grab a cuppa, fire up the Sims, let's get building. So heading back to our lot in Willow Creek, we're going to get started with the terrain tools. Now you'll find them by clicking on this hill right here with the shovel, and when you hover over it, it will say terrain tools. Inside, you'll find the paintbrush, the eraser tool, the terrain manipulation tool, and the water tool. Now you're going to be learning these first three today. The water tool we'll get to in a future video where you'll learn all about pools, ponds, and fountains. So make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on that one. But before we dive into each tool, there is one terrain mistake that nearly every single builder makes. Stick around because I'm going to show you how to dodge it and save yourself hours of frustration. The paint tool lets you bring your landscaping to life. You've got loads of different terrain paint options. We've got grass and flowers, stone and pavement, dirt and sand. Each type has a bunch of variations that you can literally paint right onto the ground. They are perfect for adding depth and realism to your build. So let's talk controls. Right here, you will find the slider for your circle brush. Underneath it is the slider for your square brush. If you're wanting to draw a winding dirt path, the circle brush is probably going to be what you want to use. If you want a crisp walkway, then the square brush is going to be your choice for that. Here's a detail that a lot of simmers overlook. Each brush has an inner and outer shape. That is the softness setting. So if you adjust the softness slider, which is all the way down here at the bottom, you will see the shapes move closer or farther apart. If your brush is super soft and you click and hold, the paint fills in very gradually, giving you very gentle faded edges. If you crank up the hardness, it will fill the whole area super fast, and you notice that it bleeds over. Watch this next bit closely because I'm going to show you how to blend these edges for a super realistic look. This is one of those little details that make your landscaping pop and takes your builds to the next level. Terrain paint layers actually stack. So let's say that you lay down some grass with the hardest brush. Now, if you switch to the softest brush and gently add some dirt on top, you'll see that it creates a very interesting pattern. Again, let me show you with the circle brush. We start with the field of flowers and we use the hardest brush to make a nice circle there. And then we go over it again with the do or die, but in the softest brush this time. There we are, a nice circle of flowers and grass with a little bit of dirt mixed in there. Now with a bit of practice, you will get these cool natural looking patches like worn trails or spots where the grass has thinned out. So for example, maybe you want a little bit of a stone path going through these flowers. We can do the cobbled it together on the softest setting. And very gently place them in the flowers. And the stones show up, but they don't delete the flowers completely. Now, most terrain paints are just for looks, but if you have island living, there's these two sand swatches, the rough sand and the illusion of sand, that are actually interactive. Do you want to make a functional sandbox for your Sims kids? Paint a square on the hardest level using one of these sands. Let's go for the rough sand. Maybe pop a fence around it, just for aesthetic reasons. Then you can click on the sand, choose Play in Sand, Build Sand Sculpture, or Build Sand Sculpture with, and you've got a handy little play area just ready to go that's super cheap. Now, if you're curious about more terrain paint tricks or you've got questions, please drop them down in the comments. I love helping people out, and I might just feature your question in a future video. So next up, we have the eraser tool. The eraser tool does exactly what it says on the tin. It erases terrain paint. The eraser tool has the exact same controls as the paintbrush tool. You can have a circle brush, a square brush, change the size and the softness. And by clicking on your terrain with this tool, it will delete any paint that's on your terrain. Now here's a shortcut that most simmers don't know. Go back to your paint tool and hold the control key on your keyboard, and you'll notice that the icon changes from a paintbrush to an eraser, and just paint like you normally would, and it completely erases your terrain paint. Seriously, hitting the control key on your keyboard will save you so much time when it comes to erasing any mistakes that you make with the terrain paint. It just saves you a lot of time because you will no longer have to go down here and click the eraser tool. Let's tackle terrain manipulation next. Yes, this tool looks super scary at first, and I'm gonna be honest with you, when I first started playing The Sims 4, I avoided this tool for ages. But once you know this one trick that I'm about to show you, you'll be sculpting hills and valleys like a pro. Stick with me and you'll see how easy it actually is. So let's get comfy with the controls. You've got your familiar circle and square brushes. Then there's a softness slider, and this extra slider here, which adjusts the speed. My tip for you, especially if you're just starting out, is to set the speed at just under half, maybe 2 ticks below half. This gives you way more control without making things painfully slow. Don't stress if it feels awkward at first. Everyone starts off in the same place, and you're gonna be surprised how quickly this all will click in your brain. So let's start simple. This tool here, which raises the terrain, just click and you'll see the ground rise up, especially in the center of your brush. Do you want even hills? Keep your mouse steady in one place as you click. The second tool will lower the terrain, and if you're at lot level, it will dig a hole down into the ground. Now here is a neat trick. If you hold control while using any of these tools, you'll notice that the arrow in the bottom or in the middle changes accordingly. So on the lower terrain tool, hit control and the arrow changes to up. And when you click it, it will raise the terrain up. Same thing with the raised terrain, click it and the arrow will go from up to down. So again, this is a great time-saving trick. Here's where you go from beginner to build wizard. Always start by raising the terrain a little higher than you actually want. Then you can use the lower tool to bring it down to the perfect height. If you go too low, you can just hold the control key and raise it back up. Now, this gives you surgical precision and saves so much frustration. And I wish that someone had shown me this trick sooner. It would have saved me hours of redoing hills. So if you're struggling to see what you've changed, you can toggle the grid off and on by hitting the G key. And the grid, you'll notice, always sits at ground level, so it's the perfect reference. You notice also that the terrain color codes itself. So we've got yellow here, which is flat, and everything that is not yellow is raised. Now this is super important. Your lot edges need to stay yellow, or your Sims might get stuck trying to enter or leave the lot at this point. Now, one quick heads up. If your terrain gets too steep or bumpy, certain objects might float, as you can see here, or just generally look weird. That is because the objects in The Sims 4 expect a perfectly flat ground. But don't worry, I'm working on an advanced tutorial that's all about placing objects inside your terrain to make it look seamless and natural. If that sounds cool, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss it. Trust me, it's going to be a game changer for realistic builds. Are you ready for the next level? Let's move on to smoothing techniques that will take your sculpted landscape from meh to magical. The Smooth Terrain tool will help your terrain manipulation efforts look a little bit better. For best results and control, I would personally set the speed down to the lowest setting. What this tool does is it takes the highest and lowest points and smooths out the transition between them. So if you have a flat area like this, and you use the smooth tool, then what will happen is the peak will lower a little bit and the flat section will raise a little bit. Now this tool just smooths out the height differences. But if you want that ultra professional tiered look that you see on gallery builds, these next two tools are your secret weapons. These are your flatten terrain and flatten to height tools. Let me just create a quick hill to show you. Now, the Flatten Terrain tool flattens the terrain at the height of this square. The height needs to be on your lot already, so you can move the square along the hill, as you can see here, or on the floor, but you cannot go any higher than the highest point on your lot. So let's say that you want to build something on a plateau. This is where the Flatten to Height tool comes in. By using a customizable height, it makes your job as a builder so much easier. You can use your control and square brackets to raise or lower the square. Let's raise the square to there, and then you line it up and you click, and the terrain will either jump up to that height or go down to that height. You can also use the height slider that's right here if you find that easier. And then because you've got this terrain flattened, you can now build on it or place objects on it a lot easier. Now, if you want to completely flatten the terrain, I would suggest you use the Flatten Lot tool. This is basically your reset button. Pressing it will take you back to the original state of the lot with everything as flat as the game can make it. So to recap, you have learned how to paint, erase, and shape your terrain. But don't just watch this tutorial and call it a day. Try this out on a 64x64 lot and tag me with your wildest experiments. I would love to see your builds and what you come up with. Here is a rookie mistake that you'll want to avoid. You want to always shape the terrain before you build your house. Otherwise, you're gonna end up with really weird things happening. You're gonna end up with a build like this with loads of mounds of dirt just like surrounding the house like so, that have this really weird flat side, or you're gonna have your terrain going down like this, exposing your foundation, which is something you most likely don't want to happen. Now that you've learned about terrain manipulation and terrain paint, it's time to get your virtual gardening gloves on, because next you're gonna learn how to landscape your builds. So are you ever stuck staring at your lot, not sure what to add, or worried that you're overdoing it with plants everywhere? Now, I used to be totally lost, but there's one landscaping rule that changed everything for me. While you're building and going through your landscaping, you might notice some really nice plants in the world that don't exist in Build By. These are debug plants. Now, I'm gonna cover how to unlock them in a future video, but until then, or just keep in mind that if you see something that's off of your lot and you cannot find it anywhere in build mode or in Build By mode, that is why. You need to think about landscaping as something that should feel alive and organic. Landscaping should flow around your lot. If you go outside in the real world and you look around, you'll notice that unless they've been purposely put there, plants don't tend to grow in straight lines. Weeds and long grass sprout up along fences, and flowers, trees, and other plants tend to grow in clumps. Now, don't get me wrong, it is perfectly fine if you want a clean, manicured lawn, with perfectly designed flower beds, stripes of variant color grasses, and not a weed in sight. But unless your Sims have a professional gardener, it's not going to be very realistic. So with that in mind, here is my first big tip. Look at your Sims surroundings and copy the types of plants, trees, and rocks that you see off of the lots. Now this trick alone took my builds from random to realistic, and people always comment on how seamlessly my lots blend into the world. So let's just go through each category: trees, shrubs, flowers, and rocks, and try to find plants similar to what you see nearby. So for trees, we've got this tree here, which looks very similar to this European beech tree. So I will take that and I'll put it right here. And maybe a smaller one can go right here at the corner. This shrub here looks similar to those ones. So again, we can put the shrubs around here. Now I've just turned on the move objects cheat so that I can place the shrubs near the trees here. We got the pretty little ditties here, which look very similar to these shrubs here. So I'm going to put a couple here. Maybe a large one there. Maybe we can do something like this. Then we can take these low-lying flowers and very carefully place them there. Then the pink azaleas, we can make some here, along with more of these yellow flowers can go there. There aren't a lot of flowers that are around this area, but we do have the dome of flowers that's over here. So we can definitely put one there, as well as, again, grabbing these grasses and maybe putting some there. Now with rocks, it doesn't really matter where you place them because rocks don't grow, they just exist. So what I tend to do is place rocks and stones as accents. Now are you ready to unlock the real magic? Here's the cheat combo that lets you create these lush layered gardens that you see in top gallery builds. But warning, once you use this, you will never want to landscape without it again. Hit Control-Shift-C on your keyboard and then type bb.move objects space on, hit enter, and now you can overlap your plants just like I've done here and place them exactly where you want. Have you ever absolutely loved a plant or a tree, but it's just too big? No real place to put the tree on your lot? You can use the open and closed square brackets to shrink or make the item even larger. And then you can place it for that perfect fit. So let's say, for example, I want an American birch tree just over here, but I think it's too small. I can make it larger if I wanted to, or I could make it smaller. Then hit Alt, rotate it, and place. And this is how you get those magazine-worthy garden beds. When you're landscaping, you're going to want to place things around the base of the house as well as generally around the lot like we've already done. Now in real life, many houses have flower beds that are full of plants growing alongside the bottom of the house, so it makes sense to do this in The Sims 4 as well. You'll want to start by placing your larger shrubs and flowers in the back, and then layer smaller ones in front. Now this is what real landscape designers call foundation planting. If you mastered this, your builds will instantly look more polished. What I like to do a lot of times is I like to grab things out that I really like for the build. Okay, so like I said, start with the tallest plants. So in this instance, it's going to be this. And we'll just put this in the back here, just layering everything out. And if you're wondering how I'm multiple placing these, I'm using the shift key. So I'm grabbing the object using the shift key and clicking, and that automatically creates a double or duplicate of the item. Now, don't be afraid to grab things and move them around, again, just to make sure that you've got everything where you want it. And if some things are too small or too big, then feel free again to resize. And another neat trick is to rotate everything so that nothing is facing in the same direction. Except for when it comes with things like sunflowers. Sunflowers almost always face in the same direction because flowers will rotate to follow the direction of the sun. So when you place things like sunflowers, make sure that you always put them facing in one direction, just to make it look a little bit more natural. Finally, we can take these bushes, they're the hedges, and I will often put these along the side of the house just to create like a natural barrier or natural fencing. So I don't always like to have proper fencing. These hedgerows make it perfect. Again, I often find the hedges in The Sims to be a little bit bigger than what I like. I normally size them down once and overlap them just a little bit so that they look a bit more natural. So I've decided not to use the square hedge, which is perfectly fine. So there we are. We have a few little edges here going around the side of the house here, and one here to kind of mark the side of this house, and it perfectly frames the pathway here. Once you've got the flower beds done and all of your plants looking the way you want it, double check for bare spots and pop in a few single flowers and maybe even some grasses. Just here and there. Doing this it's a very small detail, but it does add to the realistic value of your lot. So once you've got the flower beds done, you'll probably want to add a path. Yes, I know that Sims don't really use garden paths, but adding them makes your build look 10 times more realistic. So if you want a winding path, go back to terrain tools, paintbrush, round, and choose a nice little dirt path, maybe the scratchy in places. Make it kind of small and use a super soft brush. Let's make a path going from this sandbox, kind of nice and winding, down here to the main patio in the front of the house. So we've got this really nice path here. And then we can line this path with more flowers and rocks just to give that nice little storybook look. Now, it doesn't have to be lined completely on both sides. You do want to leave some gaps here and there for natural pathing. So maybe, for example, you'll want to leave a gap, say, over here so that your Sims can naturally continue walking here into the back garden. So let's do that real quick. We're going to use these low-lying pale yellow flowers and maybe the green grass here and there as well. Even put in some hydrangeas perhaps, and the lavender hedge here. Maybe even be a little bit silly and add a llama topiary. Then we'll add in some oopsie-daisies, maybe a few little sunflowers to bring over from the front of the house, and then a few little cute rocks. There we go. Let's turn this basic back garden into a private retreat. I'm actually going to go in and I'm going to use a tall fence. The best way to do it is to place fences by drawing. Let's go with the mission style because it's a little bit larger. And I'm gonna go with a white fencing. Now remember, you cannot place fences on the outer edge of your lot, which is a huge shame. And I, for one, just do not understand why the game will not let us do that. But there you go. I've just never got why the game won't let us play stuff like that. Again, you just always have to work around what The Sims allows you to do. So put in your fencing, moving anything around that you need to move to get it to look proper. Put in a gate. And next what you'll want to do is go back into your shrubs to find your hedgerow. And you want to layer in your hedges around your fence, or at least this is what I like to do, because I think that it looks a lot better to have some hedges going around your fencing. Doing it this way, layering your hedges outside of your fence, disguises the fact that you cannot put the fences on the outer edge of your lot. Keep in mind, you might need to move a few things as you go around. If you have any trees that look like they're clipping into the fence, then you might want to move the tree just a little bit so that it is no longer clipping. Same thing goes with any bushes or rocks. With grasses and low-lying flowers, it's generally okay, I think, to leave them be. Let them kind of clip underneath the fence, because you get that a lot in real life as well. I think that looks pretty good. And also, don't forget to put in some long grass in areas where a lawnmower would miss, such as here near the rocks, and maybe here in the corners of the fences as well, around these little areas here as well, just to make everything look a little bit more realistic. And now you see how much better that looks, and how this huge back garden went from being drab to looking a lot better now. Yes, I think that looks really, really nice. Okay, so here is my secret weapon. Yes, I've got loads. Use a tiny, soft terrain brush. About this size will do. And you want to go super soft and add shading under your grass and plants. So go to dirt and sand, and I typically use the Smarter Starter soil. So just very, very gently trace around the plants and also the sides of your house. Just around the edges, like where the roof overhangs, because these areas, there's not gonna be hardly any grass that grows. Doing the shading also makes your build look like it's part of the landscape instead of on top of the landscape. And you want to make sure also that some areas are more shaded than others. So like you see here where there's the shadow right here. I like putting in a lot of dirt where these natural shadows lie. These areas are not gonna get a whole lot of sunlight. And especially here in the flower bed, you're not gonna see much grass at all, or much, low-lying grass at all. So just shade that in completely. Same thing here around the edges of your patio or front walkway. There's not going to be much, if any, grass growing around there. And you notice over here, there's a little bit of sand. So let's grab the Grow Garden Activate or the Sunkissed Sands. We can use quite a few different ones, ranging, just depending on what you want. And we can do a little bit here along the outside, just to match up a little bit more with what we see here. Not a whole lot, but just a little hint here and there. If we make the brush really small, we can add in just maybe a little bit more sand around the sandbox here, where perhaps some sand got thrown out, or maybe it's leaking out a little bit from the edges of the sandbox, just to blend it in that little tiny bit more. Now zoom out, switch to tab mode, and admire your work. This looks absolutely amazing, right? And definitely a lot better than it did at first. So here's my challenge to you. Try these tips on your next build and share your gallery ID and build names in the comments. I love reading your comments here on YouTube, and I try to reply to every single one that you leave on my videos. Huge thanks to my paid members for supporting the channel. If you want to join, click the link in the description. And if you're ready to level up your builds even more, click here for my stairs and ladders tutorial. I'll see you there.